case, she claimed she was victimized by her mother and father in a bizarre, very violent military cult. And this is one of the pictures. This is a self-portrait of her as a young girl. You're going to be meeting her, and I want to warn you, the content of today's show is not suitable for children. This woman has spoken all over the country on the topic of cults and surviving sexual abuse and multiple personality disorder, and she's just published a book of art drawn by her alters. It's called Diary of a Survivor. Please welcome, if you will, Deja-Lee LeBrier. Welcome.
Thank you.
Takes a lot of courage to talk about something like this. I'm very glad to speak with you about it, and we've talked on the phone, so I want to have people understand what you went through, and that your parents, you say, were both in the military.
Right.
Dad was a Marine.
They were both Marines.
Very rigid discipline.
Very rigid from the very beginning, from early age. My mother used to brag about the fact that at 3, all of her children could make their beds with Marine Corps corners and stand at attention and say yes or no, sir. And we were continually restricted to our yards. We had field day every Saturday where we cleaned the house from top to bottom. And
now, but what about the cult? They were both a member of a cult. Was it a satanic cult or just their own version of what they did?
There were satanic rituals taking place, and my understanding through the stories that my alters have told is that they were both involved. My father was the head of it. My mother was his accomplice. I call her an accomplice. The feeling of lack of protection was not only during the daytime when there was no protection from the violence.
And this is one of your drawings. This is your depiction by one of your alters.
Yes.
This is Mom and Dad. Dad's got a knife with blood.
Mm-hmm.
Which altar drew this one?
It was a compilation of some little ones that did that.
Some little ones.
Mm-hmm.
He's got his holding a knife with blood, meaning where would the blood come from? What happened?
In the rituals, I don't know how graphic we can be, but there were children who were abused and sexually, and also were used, cut parts of their bodies and so on, and put in a grinder to feed the feast, to feed the people that were in the cult and give them power. There was blood drinking, and there was cannibalism of the babies that were used. And
where would they get babies?
In the cult, there are women who breed, and there are also young girls who are able to have babies, and they're at that age where they can have babies, and so they produce, through the rapes that go on in the rituals, they produce babies. And so those are used over and over again, or they find babies in places that people don't watch out for them.
You say in your book, and in the book you're writing in more detail about this, that you were used by the cult too, sexually. You were raped by your father and other men in the cult?
I was raped by a large number of people, including women and many Marines. We moved all over the country in for instance, my father was a Marine Corps recruiter, and he was also stationed in different reserve centers around the country to bring in recruits and train them, and then he trained in amphibious machinery.
And so every place he was stationed, he found a new group of people to participate with him?
That's correct.
And did the military know? Because we don't want to indict the military here.
I don't want to indict the military either. No. There's a lot of anger inside from different alters about military people. But I can't say that in the overall umbrella of the military knew about this going on, but I do know that there's a lot of stuff that happens that they are privy to but don't do anything about, but they don't condone it or they don't stop it either. So,
well, you know, when your father gets to a new location, I mean, providing that, you know, what you're telling us is true, of course, that, I mean, you don't just put an ad in the military newspaper, you know, all who want to be in a cult apply. How do you find people like that?
Well,
What's your guess about that?
There was a military sex ring which goes on around the country in different areas, and it depends on who you are and what your contacts are. But if you're meeting people all the time and you're out there talking to people, you're going to find people that are interested in getting in on these things. And they can build a network very quickly, and sometimes it can only be 3 people, or sometimes in some cases where I was at, there were many people, 20, 30 people.
What was the purpose of the rituals? What was their goal? Was it, I mean, you say it was satanic, it was to sacrifice? Why did they do them?
There's a belief that if there's blood and there's cannibalism, there's eating of human flesh, then and that's done in a ritual, then there's building of power. They become very powerful, and the upside down kind of satanic stuff, where they take the Christian beliefs and they turn them upside down, becomes a big part of it, and that builds power, where they can say, oh, those people are very weak, look at them, but we're strong, we have all this power, we can kill, and nobody knows who's going to be next, and so on. So they feel very powerful by doing that.
Deja Lee LeBrier has written a book called Diary of a Survivor, growing up in a cult, and her life as a result of that, developing multiple personality disorder. And I did have a chance to speak to Deja Lee's therapist on the phone last week, and she assures me that this is a legitimate diagnosis of multiple personality disorder, and that she has seen the altars come out in her office. And as a matter of fact, part of the therapy is to have them come out in a safe place and be able to talk about why they do the behaviors they do. Sometimes they're very damaging behaviors. They hurt you, they hurt other people, and it's to find out the purpose behind what the altars are doing and then try to find a healthier way for them to express themselves. You have a map that you have drawn of when you stopped counting, you had about 52 different personalities. And this is a map drawn a number of years ago, and these were some of the ones that you've identified, and they have named themselves to you?
Yes.
Now, what's that big one in the middle? Confident one? Is that you or another one?
That's another one. I am all of them combined into one.
And you have some ones that are very destructive, too.
Yes. To me. Internally, they don't do anything to anyone else. I think the real thing I wanted to emphasize is that each one of them has their particular behavior because they were created to protect another altar or myself. So they may seem to have bad behavior, but they aren't really bad. What they're doing is protecting us.
And this black woman is one of your altars?
Yes,
What's
her name is Maisie.
And what purpose does she serve?
She's the guardian of our system. She protects and loves unconditionally all of the altars. When they don't like each other, sometimes she takes them apart and talks to them individually, and they...
And who is Silent One?
Silent One is one of the altars in the that was militarily and satanically abused, and she doesn't speak. She's mute.
You say that you have consensus with them all now, meaning that they all agree and get along, and are they all here now? Are they all listening to this conversation?
Yes. We have a lot of multiples have what they call a board of directors, or they have group meetings and that kind of thing.
So you had a board meeting to decide, let's go talk to Kathy Fountain on live television.
That's correct.
And everybody said this is a good idea
because it needs to be told. People need to know that this kind of abuse does happen and this kind of phenomenon does occur, and that a lot of us who are out here do get misdiagnosed, either as psychotic or some other thing that they can treat with psychotropic drugs, which don't work on multiples.
Right, your therapist did mention that many times a multiple is misdiagnosed, and then they give the medication, which doesn't help at all.
Right.
That really more of a goal is to have the alters come out during therapy and figure out what their function is and try to have an agreement so nobody gets hurt.
Try to come up with a different job for them to do other than to put us to sleep. I have one who's called Druggie. And Druggie, her function is to put the system to sleep as a protective measure. So we could be, if something comes up and is triggering and is a problem for one or the other of the altars, then Druggie will come out and just totally shut us down and put us to sleep. Put me to sleep.
Lydia in Ruskin, what do you want to say to Deja Lee?
Yeah, I want to ask her, did she try to tell somebody what was going on?
Was there anybody to tell?
Was there anyone to tell? Unfortunately, there was no one to tell. pretty much almost everyone in everyone in my family was involved. But when you're so violated at such a young age, you learn very quickly to keep your mouth shut and don't talk to anyone, because you could be next. You could be sacrificed next. So the fear was...
You were afraid you would be killed.
I was definitely afraid of being killed.
And what is this? There's some pretty scary sayings on the side. I'm scared.
This is a drawing done by one of my altars who was basically afraid of that particular knife and everything that went along with it, and including Marines and raising his arms over his head and dark places and so on. It represents a large amount of fear, all related to the Marine Corps.
Yeah. We've been showing you some pretty horrific drawings by the many altars of Deja Lee, who's written a book, Diary of a Survivor, but this one is really beautiful and pleasant, and it's called Under the Sea, and it's by the altar Me. Me is the name of the altar. It's not you, me.
That's correct.
Me, the altar. And this represents a safe place.
It represents a safe place and a very peaceful place for her and for us, the system, because me has the ability to travel inside and outside of ourselves, out into the universe and inside of plants and all of that, and communes with all kinds of nature and things like that. And
you know, the skeptical side of me would have to say, how do I know that the cult really existed, this was really true, babies were really mutilated, that maybe you were sexually abused in your family, and then your mind created the whole rest of the story?
I can understand how you would feel that way, because it seems very bizarre. However, the truth is that now more and more people are coming forward and saying the truth about their life. And this is my life. I'm not saying that everyone who was sexually abused is going to become multiple, or that they were part of a satanic cult, or that the military abused them. All I'm saying is that this is my truth, and that you don't have to believe me. But there are lots of people out there who know that that's their truth also, and they're coming forward. When I was going through the beginning of the process of recovery, I met people from all around the world who have come forward drawing the very same pictures, saying the same things with altars with the same names, and who have the same illnesses because of what has occurred during their childhood.
Your brothers and sister, you have two sisters and a brother. Did they confirm? Did they say this happened too?
No, because it takes a lot of courage and a lot of work to go through the kind of process of uncovering, like an onion, peeling an onion piece by piece. You uncover another layer of pain and realizations. And I have a brother who was severely abused as a child. And my father did write me a letter admitting that he had sexually abused me and all of the kids, including my brother. And my mother went into a great amount of denial and accused my father of being the one who betrayed us. And
but either one of them admit the cult?
No. Okay. At that time, I didn't know.
The book is Diary of a Survivor by Deja Lee LaBriere, and a couple of people have called Deja Lee and wanting to know if possibly a therapist planted this idea in your mind. This is what happened to you.
They would have to have a lot of power. And there would have to be a lot of them all over the world trying to plant this in people's minds, because that doesn't happen. It can't happen. Most of all of this comes about from my own writing, my own work that I've done, and I went to a therapist to guide me, not to do it for me, and not to tell me what I was thinking. So,
okay. Tammy in Zephyr Hills, your turn.
Hi, Deja. I was just wondering, how old were you when you finally came forth with this, and how did you get out of it? Did people look at you and go, "I don't believe you," or did they say, "Wow, look what she's going through. How can I help you?"
You said the sexual abuse lasted until you were in your late teens.
Yes, actually, the sexual abuse ended on my 20th birthday when I went home for a birthday party and found out that it was just my father, and he raped me that day, and I never saw him again after that because I ran away. I had been away from home long enough to realize that there was safety out there. There were people who could help. I think what happens is that when we dissociate and become multiple, we also disconnect from other relationships. And I went through 4 marriages. On my 4th marriage, I actually married him and I loved him. And I had brought together some sort of connection with him, and I wasn't being able to become real intimate and share with him what was really going on inside of me.
He helped encourage you to get some therapy.
Yes.
Yeah, work
he
on it.
helped me through a lot.